Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us this Monday, President's Day, for another edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first here on the hazardous weather graphic, got a winter storm watch out for the Yukon Delta, mostly along the coast, and St. Lawrence Island once again in the Bering Strait coast, including Nome there on the south coast. That's coming up for tomorrow, late tomorrow, and tomorrow night through Wednesday. Another storm coming up from the Bering Sea, and that'll create more wind, snow, blowing snow, possibly mixed precipitation in those areas. And the heavy snow warning, or I'm sorry, the winter storm warning for heavy snow is still out for the greater Juneau area here, Douglas, Admiralty Island, and those locations. For tonight until, I believe, 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. As that front pushes in, significant amount of snow, anywhere from 8 to 12 inches or so expected in the normally snowier areas. Otherwise, we've got winter weather advisories here south of that area and also back to the northwest, excluding Sitka and Port Alexander, and all of Prince of Wales Island. Ketchikan not in it, Annette's not in it either, but Petersburg and Wrangell are. Otherwise, and then also there's a blowing snow advisory out for Thompson Pass coming up later tonight and tomorrow for blowing snow, as winds expected to pick up and reduce visibilities in the blowing snow. Farther to the north, winter storm warning out for the eastern Arctic coast for tomorrow and tomorrow night, and winter weather advisories back for the central and western coast, and also winter weather advisories here for the Koyukuk Valley, upper Yukon Valley, and the eastern Brooks Range. Up here along the Arctic coast, still expecting winds gusts to 50 miles an hour, creating visibilities near whiteout conditions, or that's near zero, or less than a quarter of a mile in the advisory area. Probably looking for winds gusts 35 to 40 miles an hour, and that could reduce visibility to half mile or less at times. So definitely not as severe as what's expected up along the Arctic coast. And the satellite imagery showing one band pushing off into way off into Canada there, moving across Great Bear and Great Slave Lake. And then this next system, we got several just rolling right up through the state from southwest to northeast, and then taking a turn to the east once they get up into the interior. And this front pushing clouds and precipitation now into the southeast coast. Sitka reporting rain and then snow falling farther to the east. Yakutat had about half an inch of precipitation with this feature over the last 12 hours today, even heavier amounts back to the west. And then the upper level feature here, the main low center, bringing clouds in across southwest interior, and that's now currently moving into Cook Inlet. So that'll bring another round of snow in to Cook Inlet, south central Alaska this evening, and then begin to clear out. You can see clearing out here back across the Bering Sea, and mostly cloudy up in the northwest part of the state there. And really not too bad across the Aleutians today, but the next storm already starting to affect the Shimia area. That's not all that strong of a system out there, and that'll mostly stay out there and actually weaken. But you can see the cloud shield here with the next big storm that's going to be rolling right on up into the Aleutians here later tonight and into tomorrow, and then track right on up the Bering Sea once again. On the chart today, here's this low that's moving northeastward right into Bristol Bay today. As I mentioned, gusts 60 miles an hour at Cold Bay. Nelson Lagoon had wind gusts to 50 miles per hour. And also some fairly good rainfall amounts, mostly off to the east here. As I mentioned, Yakutat picking up half an inch of precipitation. Cordova had 2/3 of an inch in the 12-hour period ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. And Seward had 3/4 of an inch of not all, mostly falling as rain. And then pink there showing, signifying a mixed precipitation condition. And then some light snow off and on northern Cook Inlet around Anchorage. And a little bit to a lesser extent or more of an extent here, depending on your upslope location, up into the Sisset and the Matanuska Valley, back to the Alaskan Range into the Kuskokwim Valley. Old low here from yesterday, weakening as it moves over the north slope, and kind of an area of light snow with that. But again, amounts not all that heavy, and then snow showers extending back toward the Chukchi Sea, southward to the northern Seward Peninsula, isolated over the upper Yukon Valley areas. And some snow showers here around the Pribilofs. Those have ended now and moved off. And then that next system, again, really not all that impressive, brings some more snow into the Shimia area. Otherwise, pretty good day here across the Aleutians. For tonight, there's the next system making its way onto the chart here for tonight, late tonight. And that'll increase the winds and precipitation chances for the central Aleutians at that time. See this other one out here kind of just slips on up to the north there and is pretty darn weak. But I'll keep some snow showers going, Shimia and Attu. High pressure building in quite nicely here right along the southwest coast, up to 1,027 millibars. That's going to dry it out, lighten the winds up, and chilly it off a little bit here with this northwest flow here. And a couple of waves caught up in that flow, so there'll be bands of snow dropping southeastward here into the central interior. Look for possible blowing snow there on the western Arctic coast with snow with that one, and then blowing snow on the east side with this weakening one that's sliding off to the east. Otherwise, this front drives right into the panhandle with the snow in the warning advisory areas. Otherwise, rain along the coast and rain spreading into the southern areas as well, with a mixture of precipitation mostly along the eastern North Gulf Coast. Chance of snow into the Copper River Basin. And then for tomorrow, after the gusty winds tonight, later tonight for Kodiak Island into early tomorrow, they really diminish. Looking for a pretty nice, mostly sunny afternoon with definitely lighter winds, high pressure, dry conditions, colder temperatures due to that northwest flow, temporarily colder temperatures, cooler temperatures. Look for some snow showers with this very weak front over the eastern interior, a trough blowing snow, a little bit tighter gradient, some more wind there, and that's in the warning area for the Arctic coast. A lot better back to the west, though, for tomorrow afternoon, and lots of sunshine here in the northwest as well. And snow showers decreasing here across the southeast coast. Snowfall levels after coming up will fall right back down again and could be still mixed, though, Prince of Wales Island. This system pushing, blowing snow into the Pribilof Islands, or at least a pretty good increase in the winds with snow, turning toward mixing with or becoming rain here late in the day. Rain and wind into the Alaska Peninsula from the eastern Aleutians, and lots of snow showers back out to the west. Outlook for Wednesday, that system drives northward here, pushes that front eastward and northward. So snow and blowing snow start to improve a little bit over the Yukon Delta, but not for St. Lawrence Island into the Bering Strait coast. And even Selwyn Valley, possibly Kotzebue, could see blowing snow conditions with low visibilities depending on how much snow actually gets in there by the afternoon. High pressure retreating into the Yukon, but still close enough to keep the eastern interior dry and mostly clear up to the northeast. And more precipitation and another upturn in the temperatures come into south central Alaska. Rain for Kodiak, snow showers in the colder air following the front behind here over the southern Bering Sea and central eastern Aleutians. Next storm already poised to move into the, or will be moving into the western Aleutians during the afternoon on Wednesday. Southeast coast just looks pretty good, dry, variable clouds and light winds. Low temperatures there for tonight, not too bad. 30 to 35 for your lows with the moisture and ocean air coming in. And 20s here, southern Alaska, lower 30s, Kodiak Island. And single numbers to a little below zero, upper Yukon Valley, North Slope and Arctic coast. Teens for the southwest coast, mid-20s for the Pribilofs. And the highs for tomorrow, 5 to 10, we'll call it, for the North Slope Arctic coast and into the Brooks Range. And teens to lower 20s, central interior, 30 to 35, south central Alaska. And mostly in the 30s, mid to upper here for the Panhandle, outer coastal areas rising to near or into the lower 40s. And lower 40s, Alaska Peninsula, 44 for Dutch Harbor and possibly Nikolsky, otherwise in the 30s back out there to the west. And then Wednesday morning lows, a little chillier up here in the northeast and back below zero for the Tanana Valley into the Copper River Basin. Northway Tok getting down to that 10 to 15 below range with below zero temperatures. Back to the west, zero right there. Kotzebue 11 at Nome, 17 at Gamble. And looks like lows back down into the lower 20s for Bristol Bay and 30 for Kodiak, staying above freezing though for the Alaska Peninsula and then near freezing for the central Aleutians, while the southeast coast here lows 20s to lower 30s. And then your afternoon highs shaping up like this, right around zero up in the north and northeast, 25 to 30 south central Alaska, lower 40s for Kodiak Island.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Pushing on into flying weather, we've got IFR here in over the Yukon and part of the Kuskokwim Delta, Nunivak Island, back up and just clipping St. Lawrence Island, followed by some VFR over the Pribilofs and then more marginal VFR over the Aleutian chain. Marginal VFR with areas of IFR, especially the upper Tanana Valley and on up into the southern upper Yukon Valley there, at least to and north of the river, actually almost up at Porcupine River. Patch of IFR up on the north slope, some IFR starting out northern Cook Inlet and the Madanuska Valley, also the eastern North Gulf Coast, and socked in IFR for the Panhandle. Excuse me. And then for tomorrow afternoon, that improved somewhat, still marginal VFR, otherwise the IFR now more restricted over toward the border. And not too bad here over the interior from the Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak, right on up until you get to the eastern Arctic coast and some IFR there, otherwise just patching marginal conditions over the interior. IFR, southern, or actually almost south of St. Lawrence Island now into the southwest coast, Bristol Bay, VFR, and then lots of IFR here, Alaska Peninsula, all the way out to Kiska Island. And for Wednesday morning, next system coming up, and so a pretty widespread area of IFR with the frontal boundary here from the northern Bering Sea right along the coast, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula to Unalaska Island, and then trailing on back to the west there to VFR for Shimya. Not too bad over the interior. We have this area here, a zone of IFR in that location, otherwise pretty good, and then some persistent IFR eastern Arctic coast and central and southern Panhandle, marginal VFR. For the afternoon, that really kind of holds in stationary status quo there with VFR, say Juneau on up through Lynn Canal Glacier Bay. Good VFR, Gulf of Alaska, eastern northern interior looking pretty good. This zone of IFR still hanging tough there east of the Nulato Hills, and just massive amount of IFR here coming in into the southwest all the way to Kodiak Island, extending back to the Pribilofs, socked in for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians out to Adak and Atka, and actually that band extending back toward Shimya, but that too is in the VFR zone. Passes, Anatuvik and Adigan, IFR becoming marginal tomorrow, and for Lake Clark and Merrill, becoming VFR for the afternoon, starting out marginal in the early morning, and rainy, IFR, and becoming marginal VFR. Probably won't go VFR there until early evening Saturday. And for windy, IFR becoming VFR, and Isabel kind of holding occasional marginal conditions there. Mentasta, IFR becomes VFR, possibly. It may only become marginal VFR, but optimistically I went for VFR in the afternoon. Tanita, same trends. IFR in the morning, rapidly improving throughout the day, becoming VFR. And for Portage, IFR becoming marginal, Chilkoot and White, starting out IFR and then gradually improving to marginal VFR. Freezing levels here, almost up to the Russian coast there with the continued southerly flow out over the Bering and then down into Bristol Bay, hugging the North Gulf Coast, and now over toward the eastern border of the Panhandle with that onshore flow and moisture from the Pacific, otherwise 2,000 to 4,000 feet south of the Aleutians. And for icing, none over the interior, and diminishing icing here, isolated moderate. That's going to be shifting off to the southeast throughout the day. And in this area, some considerable moderate coming up the Alaska Peninsula, and also some icing threats for the Pribilof Islands and the eastern Aleutians. Jet stream, 150 knot rid, 150 knot jet max here, coming over the top of this ridge, and then kind of another ridging effect out here over the northern Bering Sea. So northwest flow at about 40 to 60 knots there over the northern interior. Much stronger here coming across Kodiak Island, but then diving off the coast of the Panhandle. Taking a look at 9,000 feet. Here's the next storm rolling on into the southern Bering Sea with 45 to 60 knots, some cases 70 knots just south of the Alaska Peninsula. Ridging, light variable winds under the ridge. Northerlies 20 to 25, maybe up to 35 here up over the northeast. Northwest 30, mostly off the southeast coast. About the same pattern at 3,000 feet here. 40 to 50 knot winds ahead of this system. Light under the ridge. Northwest 15 to 25 into the Panhandle. Turbulence, moderate chop, pretty widespread Alaska Peninsula on out toward Atka, up to the Pribilofs. Narrow band here along the Alaska Range.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, joined again by Eric Stevens from the GINA, or Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Thanks for joining us again, Eric.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. We are talking about satellites today, and what are satellites? And the easy way to talk about that would be to introduce our friend the globe here, which is a round spheroid type shape. We haven't been on a flat Earth as far as history is known for several hundred years now, and because of that we also know that we are orbiting around other objects in space, and that objects are orbiting around the Earth as well. We call all those things satellites in some form or fashion, right, Eric?
Right. Well, this leads to the discussion of Johannes Kepler's research 400 years ago. Did some of the early work and founded the 3 laws of planetary motion, which are important to planets and also to weather satellites.
Okay.
Kepler's first law talks about how the orbit of an object around another object is an ellipse, not necessarily a circle.
Kind of a flattened circle?
Yeah, depending on how flat, so
squished
it could be.
Okay.
For our purposes, we'll just say they're mostly circular.
Okay.
The second law is most important for us, though, and that is the closer an object is to the thing it's orbiting, the faster it goes. So in the solar system, the planet Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. It orbits the sun in 88 days. It moves at 100,000 kilometers an hour.
It's a lot different than Earth.
Moving.
Okay.
Right. And further out from the Earth is Jupiter, and it moves at only 1/4 the speed of Mercury, and it has to go further, so it takes 12 of our years for Jupiter to make one lap. The further out you are, the slower you go.
Okay.
So we're talking about planets. What does it have to do with weather satellites? Turns out Kepler's laws apply to planets orbiting the sun. They also apply to satellites orbiting the Earth.
Okay.
You know, our natural satellite is the moon. There's the famous Apollo 8 Earthrise shot.
Beautiful shot.
Oh, yeah, you could just talk about that forever. December 1968, the moon is about 250,000 miles away from the Earth.
Okay.
It takes a month to go around the Earth. It's that far out, it takes a full month to do an orbit. Another shot here of the International Space Station. Instead of being 250,000 miles out, the ISS is only 250 miles up. It's really close. And so it doesn't take a full month for the space station to go around the Earth. It only takes 90 minutes. It's so close, it just whips right around 90 minutes.
Okay.
So weather satellites, there are a number of weather satellites, and there are a number of orbits. The further out you have the satellite, the longer it takes to go around the Earth. And this is important because different satellites have different purposes. So we have a satellite here. This little salt shaker lid will serve as our satellite going around the Earth. Let's say you have a satellite that's 22,000 miles above the Earth. This is kind of a magical spot, because at that distance, it takes a full day for the satellite to go around the Earth. Imagine if you put your satellite 22,000 miles up from the equator and had it go with the Earth as the Earth spun.
The same speed.
Right. The satellite goes around the Earth just as fast as the Earth itself is turning. In effect, the satellite will hover in one spot.
I see.
And it appears when you make a movie loop of picture after picture after picture. You can replay that and you get these movie loops. Geostationary satellites, these are called, because they're stationary in appearance. And they provide a constant frame of reference. We've got an example here. Another nice thing about these satellites, since they're that far out at 22,000 miles, you can see from pole to pole, which is nice. So they're pretty broad view and a constant frame of reference.
So those are the pictures. If you're watching a weather satellite loop on TV, your favorite weather show, that's the picture that you're going to see, is one that's sitting over the same spot.
If you're seeing a movie loop play again and again, that came from geostationary satellites. That's the only way you can do that.
Yeah.
The bummer, though, for us in Alaska is we're up on the very top of the planet. And for geostationary satellites to work, they have to be over the equator. So for the geostationary bird to view Alaska, it's kind of like reading a book, but you're reading it edge on like that.
Right.
So there's another kind of orbit called the polar orbit,
Okay.
which is nice. We're near the pole.
Yeah.
And here's a satellite. Those polar orbiters are much closer to the Earth, getting down toward International Space Station elevation. And they're not in the equatorial plane. Rather, their orbital plane is inclined like this. And the Earth turns under that satellite as the satellite orbits. The nice thing about that is for Alaska, the satellite will go right over Alaska a few times a day. And so you get a much closer image. We've got a shot from the Sumi NPP satellite. Specifically, it's a true color image from the VIRS sensor. That's an acronym there.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful shot of Alaska, and you can see so much detail. The kind of detail, because you're close in,
Very high resolution.
you couldn't get this kind of view from geostationary satellites. The advantage of these polar orbiters is nice close imagery. You can see a lot of detail. The disadvantage, though, is that the satellite flies by,
Right.
and then you have to wait a while to get the next image. And if geostationary weaknesses are that you're reading the page like that, the polar orbiter, you're reading the page straight on, but it's so close, and then it zips by, and you have to wait for the satellite to come around the Earth again. So there's no one perfect solution. Different satellites for different orbits, each has their strength, and amazingly, it all comes back to Johannes Kepler and his laws of planetary motion. The same laws that govern how the planets orbit the sun, they govern how the satellites orbit the Earth, and even our little pretend salt shaker right here.
Right. Okay. Well, since the 1957 Sputnik, we've been putting man-made objects into orbit around the Earth and starting to get pictures back. Who knows what will happen in the next 50 to 100 years? Amazing
it's
stuff.
a growing science, and the future is bright.
Thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. And for more information on Dehne and what the satellite systems do there and what Eric's been talking about today, you can go to the web address on your screen. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis. Still retreating a little bit to the north, but also ice reforming in some of the areas that it lost. Not a lot, but because the sea surface temperatures are still so cold. And actually, it's going to continue to retreat here for the upcoming week, or at least through Saturday, but we're looking more in a 15 to 25 nautical mile range as opposed to the higher amounts of 20 to 40 miles an hour we had earlier in the week. So still retreating northward, but not quite as drastic as it has been. Coastal water forecasts. West winds 30 knots on the south coast. Those diminished to 20 knots on the north coast. Northwest 15 for Clarence Strait. South 20 for Stevens Passage. South 15 for Lynn Canal. Outlook for Wednesday. North winds 25 knots. Gusts to 40 knots there for Lynn Canal. North 25 for Stevens Passage. 20 knots out of the north for Clarence Strait. Northwest 20 to 25 here on the south coast. These up to 16 feet. And more variable winds at 15 knots on the north coast. Northwest 30 tomorrow for Prince William Sound. That blows right on out into the eastern North Gulf Coast. And gale force northwesterlies here on the western North Gulf Coast. 40 knot northwesterlies for the Barren Islands. West 40 knots, gust 55 there for Kamishak Bay. And southern Cook Inlet, northwest gusts 45 knots as well, but much lighter north of the Forelands. Outlook for Wednesday, northeast 15, northern Cook Inlet 20 knots to the south, and 25 knot winds for Kamishak Bay out of the northeast, southeast 25. Barren Islands, easterlies 15 to 20 for the North Gulf Coast, and northeast at 10 with 2-foot seas for Prince William Sound. And then for Kodiak Island tomorrow, we got northwest 30 with gust 45 there, and west 20, gust 40 for Shelikof Strait. Those will be coming down during the afternoon. And then southeast 30 knots across the Alaska Peninsula, east 20 for Bristol Bay. Those kick up a little bit, south 25 the following day on Wednesday, west-southwest 25 to 30 for the peninsula, Castle Cape to Sitkinak, south 30 knots, south 25 east side of Kodiak. And then for the Aleutians, kind of a westerly wind at about 20 out of here over the western areas west of Kiska. And then light winds here, Kiska to about Adak, and then the Adak-Atka zone. East 30 on the north side, west 25 south side, and east to southeast 30 to 35 knots here for the eastern Aleutians. Outlook for Wednesday, those all turn westerly at 25 to 30 knots with seas running anywhere from 11 to 18 feet. West 30 knots, Adak and Atka. Southwest 30 knots from Adak to Kiska. And then gales re-enter the picture in the afternoon out toward Shemya and Attu. Southwest coast tomorrow, small craft advisories, east winds 25 knots, seas 4 to 6 feet. Gales for the Pribilofs, east 35, 12-foot seas, southeast 25, 9-foot seas for St. Matthew Island and St. Lawrence Island, southeast at 20, lighter in Norton Sound. And then on Wednesday, we've got gale force winds in Norton Sound, as well as St. Lawrence Island, easterlies 35 to 40 across that area. West 30 knots from the northern Bering Sea, as well as the Pribilofs, and then southwest into Kuskokwim Bay at about 30 with 11-foot seas, north of Nunivak Island, south winds 30 knots. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, full gales there tomorrow in the forecast. West 40 knots, and then becoming more northwest down to 30 knots here for the central coast, and only 20 knots on the west side. And then brisk wind advisories here, Cape Thompson, Cape Beaufort, south 30, 15 knots in the Chukchi Sea. Those kick up to 35 knots out of the east here, so gales come into the area from Wales up to Cape Thompson on Wednesday with brisk wind advisories up to Cape Beaufort, and then just 15-knot winds here for the west side and the central coast. Winds a lot lighter, at least cut those values in half here on the east side. Southeast 20, turn west at 20 toward Demarcation Point. And for tonight again, winter storm warning for heavy snow for the Juneau Douglas Admiralty Island area tonight as this system pushes in, and some winter weather advisories due to significant amounts of snow, some of which might blow around, but rain along the coast. Temperatures on the rise there, and drying out and cooling off here, south central Alaska. Pretty good winds coming into Kodiak Island. That'll definitely clear it out, and snow showers will diminish. A couple of disturbances up to the north keep the chance of snow longer, but high pressure along the coast looking good for at least tomorrow here in the interior. Next storm into the Aleutians drives northward, snow and blowing snow in the west on Wednesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.